All right, I want to go now to the case of Joshua Nagel. Now, just if you recall, again, he was the father, divorced father. He's got young daughters. I think they're age 5 and 8. But his divorced wife wanted them to get vaccinated. Joshua Nagel, being up on the science, a watcher of this show, their family are supporters of our center. In fact, I connected Joshua Nagel to Attorney Piccirilli when he called me. Said, "Who do you know an attorney?" I said, "Yep, I think I do." And Greg Piccirilli took the case. But Joshua Nagel's up was understood that his daughters already had COVID, therefore had natural immunity, even though the state wouldn't recognize it. He understood that the vaccines weren't effective in stopping the spread and potentially even harmful to young people. He understood that, even though the state didn't recognize it. And he also understood that per his divorce settlement, that unless both parents agree to a medical procedure, something like that, it's not going to happen. So when his wife wanted his daughters to be vaccinated, he said, "No, I don't think there's any case to have them vaccinated." And so she took him to court, and they lost in family court. Again, the courts were completely overtaken by this COVID-19 craze and these government narratives. They took it to the Superior Court. The Superior Court ruled against them. They took them to the full state Supreme Court. And if you recall that interview, the state Supreme Court, in an amazing display of ignorance and stick your head in the sand syndrome, made some astonishing comments that were, they just, again, believing things that were completely false, provable false. They would not accept an amicus brief from experts across the country, citing all the medical evidence to support the father, Joshua Nagel. They wouldn't accept it. They wouldn't accept the medical evidence. They wouldn't accept the science from like 5 or 6 dozen medical professionals across the country. They made some outrageously ignorant statements, and they ruled against Joshua Nagel, and now his daughters had to get the vaccine. Well, when they went to get the vaccine on May 9th, it was a traumatic experience that might have long-term negative effects on the girls and certainly on the father. Here's a copy of the complaint that Joshua Nagel filed with the Rhode Island Department of Health. I don't know if you can see the highlighted part. I know sometimes it's blurry and the print is small. But the pediatrician who argued for that the daughters should be vaccinated, Dr. Colleen Powers from Kingstown Pediatrics in North Kingstown on Scrabbletown Road. You need to know she is. If she's your doctor, you should know. You should read this stuff. And they took the kids there to get their vaccines, even though the emergency youth authorization had been since stopped. It was no longer even a legal vaccine. But again, there's so many terrible things going on. But the daughters, now look, I'm going to go back to the complaint in a second. Now, the daughters apparently were influenced by the father, and that's what parents do. But apparently they personally did not want to get the vaccine. And they accepted the father's arguments. I can only imagine what kind of discussions took place between mother and daughters and father and daughters. But for whatever reason, they themselves did not want the vaccine. They must have understood at some level what was going on in the courts. And when they went to get the vaccine, it was no, I mean, you probably could make a horror movie out of this. Apparently, it was one of the most traumatic experiences everybody experienced. Joshua Nagel says, "I can document," and I think he took video or audio of the whole thing. "I can document the following occurred. It was brutal." I'm paraphrasing. Both my daughters forcibly restrained. They were pleading and screaming not to get the jab. They were forcibly injected while being held and restrained on the floor, screaming loudly. The 8-year-old, the 5-year-old hid under the table, not wanting to get the injection, screaming. Forcibly extracted from underneath the table, restrained again, forcibly injected, screaming and yelling. He called it thuggish force. The doctor and her assistant were the guilty ones in physically restraining and forcing this vaccine upon these young girls. Josh Nagel called it thuggish force by this Dr. Colleen Powers and her assistant. And he says a completely unnecessary, lasting psychological trauma to my young daughters. Can you picture the scene? And again, I ask what I asked in the beginning. What is it? What is it? What kind of infection is this in people's mind that would force this kind of brutality, this kind of thuggish force onto young 5 and 8-year-old girls? And again, I'm not just talking about the doctor and her assistant. I'm talking about I'm talking about the family court judge. I'm talking about the superior court judges. I'm talking about the lawyers who would defend them, who would defend this action. And I'm talking about the Supreme Court judges in the state. What is it? What is going on out there where so many people are so caught up in this baloney? That so many people are living in this liberal never land of make-believe, and they want to impose it on everybody else, even if forcibly, upon 5 and 8-year-old young girls. What is going on? They want young kids. Now think about the irony here. Here's an 8-year-old girl. They don't want the jab. Does anybody listen to them? No. But yet these same morons, these same thugs who use this force on these young girls are the same ones who will say, well, we think even a 3, 4, 5-year-old young boy or girl should determine whether or not they have sex-altering surgical mutilation or chemical castration. Which is it? Now, we know what it is. It's neither. They shouldn't be deciding about the vaccines. That's their parents' role, and they shouldn't be deciding about transgender until they're a legal adult at age 18. They're transgender transitions. Up until that point, it's the parents' domain. But still, I'm just pointing out the hypocrisy of their arguments. You can't have it both ways. There is only one way, and you and I know what the right way is. Now, in a divorce case, when one parent feels one way, another parent, okay, yep, that's obviously a matter for the courts. But if the courts make those decisions on completely ignorant statements and beliefs and false beliefs, and have no clue about what's going on in the real world, and they reject an amicus brief that provides evidence and facts and proof about what's going on in the real world when it comes to this issue, again, you get why? What is it about this stuff?